And thank you for inviting us to come here today. I can't promise it'll be as exciting or as funny as what it was this morning, but we'll give it a go. And there will be a lot of reading from papers, unfortunately. So as Trish says, I'm Yola Johnson. I'm Practice Development Sister at Trinity Hospice in Blackpool, and I've been there at Trinity for 20 years. So yes, I am part of this thing that doesn't like change, and I've seen lots of change in our hospice, but have had to go with it as well. I've changed roles many times during that time, and I've been Practice Development Sister for 6 years now. I'm still learning every day and still enjoying my job. And this is Rick Fisher, who's our physiotherapy, who's also added to his scope of practice as well.
Yeah, so I've been with the hospice for just over 4.5 years now. So I came at the back end of the last massive transformational change that they went through. So I feel very much a part of the new wave taking things forward from now.
We're just going to aim today to give you a background in how we developed our healthcare assistant programme. It was a while in developing, but we got there in the end, and how we've progressed to date. It's technology as well, I can't do that. So originally, we looked at our workforce and their roles, and looked at the job descriptions because that was being re-evaluated at the same time, and identified the lack of staff that we had, and we were increasing staffing at the times. And when we went through the last change, we got rid of some posts and reinvented some others, which is how I got to practice development, and we lost a few staff on the way. So we needed to make sure we got the right amount of staff of the right grade working at the hospice. When I originally started at the hospice, our MVQ3 healthcare assistants who were employed at that rate were paid at a higher rate than the others, and they performed extra tasks to what the other healthcare assistants did, and they were allowed to check medications alongside a competent registered nurse, and that had been going on since they'd done their MVQ level 3s. So when we looked at the job description and pay scales, we looked at it to see if we were getting value for money. Because it is a business at the end of the day, and we've had to evolve into that business sense, really. The staff themselves had also asked about expanding those skills that they already had, because they felt that they were losing some of their skills as we got more staff nurses in post. And at PDRs, they'd asked if they could continue the care of the patients by increasing their skills and increasing their knowledge base. So we initially looked at how this training could be delivered in November 2016, and for Rick's role from 2017.
So Yola and I are just going to kind of back and forth between from a nursing perspective and then the physiotherapy perspective. So from where we were looking at, it was about a service development. It was a limited resource. Back when I first started, there were two therapists. There was myself and an occupational therapist, and we were both part-time. And then when the occupational therapist left, there was an option for reassessing and restructuring. So we did explore different options, sort of replacing like for like and what else was available. So there was a proposal put to the new management to use some of those freed up resources to enable a full-time therapy lead to develop the service for the future. And then that sort of service would be supplemented by the development of the HCAs to expand the reach and the cover of the service. So that was led by Hospice UK produced a document in 2015, how rehabilitative is your hospice, and there's a checklist to go along with that. So kind of use that as an audit of the service as it was at the time, and then base the proposal around that. And that really fit well with the business plan and the future direction of the organisation, who were really keen to develop and upskill from within to meet what the predicted demands of the future are going to be.
So we looked at the benefit to the patients and to our service really, and to promote that continued patient access to skilled care and raising standards of access to that care. The idea was to enable patients' needs to be met in a timely fashion without having to wait for another member of staff to become free to deliver that care, which is why we looked at certain tasks for them to carry out. And I know it's not a task-based society these days, but sometimes that is what they like to do. And we still have those tasks to complete, and whether that's a trained nurse or an untrained nurse, then it still has to be done. So we looked at how we benefit from that. We also needed to free up some nursing time because we have all the other pressures of host of paperwork and DSTs and discharges and everything else, because we had a discharge coordinator originally, but we'd lost that role in the reorganisation, and they weren't putting into that role, so it was back to the nursing staff doing that, which takes up a huge amount of time, as you probably know. We have limited social worker input at our hospice. We don't have a dedicated social worker anymore at our hospice. We have to source from the other social work fund. So we've got 6 social workers that work alongside us. We cover a huge area. Blackpool, Fylde and Wyre is quite a large area, and it's 2 CCGs. So funding for the social worker post isn't available. And it also freed up time for that staff member to be able to talk to relatives if they needed to. It also broke down the barriers between the team, and it gave a greater understanding of everybody else's roles. And it felt as though we were listening to them, because they brought it up in PDR and we listened to them. They felt as though they were being proactive in introducing this. So we organised training to give them meaning to their PDRs, and it also follows our values as an organisation, which alongside yours are caring, adaptable, responsible. We strive for excellence and we are socially engaged.
So looking at promoting the continuous patient access to the care from the physio point of view, again mentioned earlier, thanks to the finite resources that the service had, patient contact was just not at its optimum to ensure a timely and continuous support from the therapy service. So instead of employing additional therapists to try and meet that, because that wouldn't have met the round-the-clock demands that our patients had, it would also have had an increased cost to the service. Training existing and more importantly experienced staff, not just in new skills but also sort of developing and highlighting the skills that they've already got in their roles. That means that our patients get a more complete input, and that's regardless of the time of the day or time of the week. And responding to the individual need, it makes it very responsive from that point of view, whether that needs to be a walk-in aid or someone's identified as needing a review with the physiotherapist. They get done, and we've actually seen that happen on a night shift, which was really good, so that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And again, as you already mentioned about the PDRs, the development of the workforce, it has a direct knock-on effect to the staff. We've seen an improvement in job satisfaction. They feel and feedback that they're able to do a lot more to help. It's a great sense of this working when I can be off for my weekends or annual leave, and I can come back and this work has already been done. There's been a basic assessment, there's been equipment that's been prescribed, already dealt with. This is extended into breathlessness and anxiety management as well, which is a big part of the service we cover. And then other things such as stair practice and assessment has continued over the weekend. This has actually had a knock-on effect to facilitating quicker discharge planning, getting people home where they want to be. We've seen a reduction in falls risks from patients who might be admitted on a Friday afternoon or an emergency weekend that they're getting seen. And they're just getting seen a lot more quickly than they would be if they were waiting for a formal physio assessment.
So we looked at how we were going to deliver this for the clinical side and the nursing side. To deliver it, we decided to approach an outside company, which may seem strange and did cost us a little bit extra, but we thought if we got an outside company in to deliver the training over a certain period of time, it would be more cost effective than to send our staff out to do training. I think the cost for them to come and train our staff was something like £2,000 for 2 days, which if we'd have sent each staff individually, then it would have been an awful lot more money than that. And they developed, we approached M&K Update, and they developed to see if they could develop this package that we specifically needed for our staff. We also needed to include all the level 3 MVQ staff, so we didn't want to leave anybody out, so we took both days and nights into consideration, so that everybody over the whole thing had the same skills. There were objections, I will say that. It wasn't the easiest of things when we first talked about it, because they didn't see the point, they didn't think they'd get any use out of it, and we had the usual, well, you know, why should we? And yeah, we were trying to point out that they were getting paid quite a lot of money extra and very little difference between our staff nurses and our HCA level 3s. So following the training, we aimed to develop competency sheets, which we've done, so we were sure that they were safe and competent practitioners, and that they were also comfortable in carrying out those tasks that we'd managed to train them up in. The training consisted of both theory and practical sessions for both the physio role and the skills lab, and the staff were encouraged to complete individual reflections on the practice that they'd had, and we also did competency sheets for them to deliver, and we've since done OSCE type evaluations to make sure they're still up to date in the future.
So the physio training plan was initially proposed as a 12-month trial. The success has since led to that being a permanent fixture within our hospice. We're still trying to have all our level 3 inpatient staff complete the programme, and so the plans are to complete that first and then move through other members of the team, so looking into the night staff, and then also moving now into the new community staff. So that's currently an area of development for our organisation. They're investing heavily in expanding into the community and really trying to look after people in their own homes where they want to be, trying to avoid unnecessary admissions to the hospice or hospital. So then we've got the competency workbook, so we need to be auditing their fitness for purpose of those in their current form, and then that needs to be in line with the service and organisational development need as that changes. So the staff go on to keep the portfolio as a reference guide for something to build on through their time and through their career. And then, as Yola mentioned, there's the potential for formal OSCE-style assessments in all areas.
So from a nursing side, we looked at to focus on certain areas that would be beneficial to the patient and to the workload. So our staff all completed male and female catheterisation training. They did general observations of blood pressure, temperature, pulse, respirations, blood glucose, urinalysis and peak flow recordings, which although they could do, they didn't have the background knowledge to underpin it. So at least now they've got that as well. And they also did subcut injections. So we did training on subcut injections, but it wasn't just the practical skills, it was just the theory as well. It wasn't ideal in the way they were trained, because she didn't have we expected her to bring mannequins and all that sort of thing with her, and they didn't. They were practicing on scouring pads and all sorts of things. I'm sure some of you will remember injecting oranges when we were doing our training, because that's what I did as well. And she bought scouring pads to pass catheters through, and there was all sorts of very strange things going on. So although it wasn't ideal and we paid this money, they got the basic idea of what they were supposed to be doing. So they are now able to perform all these skills, and not only with the blood pressures and blood pressure readings and pulses, they can use the electronic equipment. It was also the manual equipment that they were trained in as well, so that we've got a better skill mix if we do need to use the manual blood pressures. Because they were already doing the medication rounds with the staff nurse, because we were doing double checkers at that point, we needed to invest in the subcut injections, because when they went on the drug rounds, they stood at the trolley and the nurse went off and did the deltaparin injections and things like that. So we thought it was more beneficial to teach them to do the subcut injections so they could do that as well. And most patients in their own home give their own deltaparin injections and heparin injections and insulin. So we thought it was, better for them to be able to do it. And since then, we've encouraged them to be involved in drawing up of syringe drivers. So they put the needles in to deliver the drugs for the syringe drivers, because it's only a subcut delivery. They draw up the syringe drivers in the pharmacy with the trained nurse, and they set them up from scratch with the trained nurse. And it's just extending their skills all the time. It is still the trained nurse's responsibility at the end of the day, but it has given an awful lot of confidence and abilities that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
So the physio-specific development, it was based in basic mobility assessment, as well as facilitation and promotion of patient independence. So this has usually involved a provision of a walking aid, and followed by an assessment of the sitting balance, standing balance, and then the mobility in general. They're taught to consider the suitability of the patient for this intervention. So are they well enough? What was their previous level of activity? That kind of thing. And the HCAs are generally, they're really well placed to do this work, as they're quite often the first professional they meet when they arrive at the hospice. They're able to facilitate this really early assessment of transfer and mobility. They quite often they've worked with the ambulance crew or the family who have actually brought that patient in, so they've usually completed that assessment without actually realising that it's happened. So a lot of what's involved in this work is sort of celebrating the fact that they're already doing it, and almost just highlighting it to them, and making them aware of what they're doing. So where it is necessary, the patients are assessed by myself as the physiotherapist, but the HCAs, as part of the programme, they're trained in the basics of rehabilitation and exercise facilitation, so they can then continue that day-to-day work with the patients. So they might be guiding through and progressing physical activity and exercise programmes. So once they've finished with us, those HCAs who've previously completed the training, they're asked to consider this rehab within their everyday role. So for an example, before they came to the training, they were walking with a patient to the bathroom because they needed to have a shower or whatever it was. Now with a little tweak in technique and thinking, it's physio. So they, we can document that and make a few changes so that they're getting that extra input. So they also, we cover day therapy and inpatient unit. So we obviously work with those patients in day therapy as well. So they tend to be a higher level, a more able population. We're trying to get that to be earlier in their journey so we can expand on that. This is where we've got the gym facility, and exercise groups and interaction in that way could be really useful.
So as I've said, with M&K doing the training, they decided that they could do it over 2 full days. They decided that the catheterisation needed a full day to be taught fully. So they did the subcut injections and the blood pressures on one day, and then they did the catheterisation on the second day. It was completed in June 17 and took some planning, because that's how we got to June 17 from November the year before. to have 12 staff off the unit, because that's how many healthcare assistant at level 3 we'd got at the time, and getting their shifts covered either with trained staff or other healthcare assistants and bank staff. So following from the formal training, the staff were given competency sheets for the 3 elements, which we'd already developed for staff nurses. So in our induction programme for staff nurses, we already gave them competency sheets on catheterisation, male and female, and subcut injections and syringe driver replenishment. So we just adapted those for the healthcare assistants to use as well. They were observed by members of the staff on the team, so the staff nurses on the team were amazing with them, and they really got involved, and they were quite happy for them to go alongside them and watch them do the catheterisations, stand with them while they did the injections or the things, so they could get signed off quite quickly. They did gain confidence. They didn't have a set number of competencies to complete. We put 3 each on the sheets, but it depended on that person, because some are lacking in confidence, some aren't as good as others and need a lot more reassurance. So it depended on the person themselves, and our night staff don't have as much input because of it being at night. They don't get as much opportunity to do syringe drivers and things like that, so it has taken a long time to get some of the night staff through the competencies. And because they don't use it as often as the day staff, because we have separate nights and day staff at our hospice, it's an ongoing process to continue those competencies and to upgrade them all the time.
Okay, so coming from the physio point of view again, so number of taught sessions within the implementation. So there's no set amount. Each placement begins with a short sort of concentrated period of education with myself, just going through. We use the portfolio to outline that, just let them know what works to come, what's expected, how we're going to try and achieve our learning outcomes. So the teaching really is on the job as much as is possible. So they would start by coming around and shadowing me, seeing the work that I do, asking questions, learning that way. If it's not possible that we see all types of patients, so it may be that within their period of time with me, we don't necessarily have someone who needs a stair assessment or that's provided with elbow crutches, is quite a rare thing for us to use. So in that case, we would simulate it. So they've got that awareness, they've got the understanding, but also always knowing that the backup is there to come back to us if they're not sure about anything. So they're planned around our current patients, their need and their availability. It's guided by the work that they've to complete for their portfolio. So we aim to meet each morning to discuss and try and plan the day based on what the needs of the patients are and what the learning needs are. And to help with that, the HCAs actually maintain a presence and facilitate our team communication with the inpatient unit and the day therapy by attending their morning handover meetings on behalf of our team. So we just do as many sessions as are needed to address all the competencies and build their confidence, so that can continue for as long as they need to. They're assessed informally, really. It's OSCE style, it's me watching, but also there's the portfolio written work. So we do have a competency tick sheet that we will go through, and we'll both sign that to make sure that we're both happy from competence and a confidence point of view. They utilise reflections to take account of the work that they're doing, and then there's a small section in there where there's a question and answer. So there's a lot of information that we've developed in the portfolio, and then some questions to go along with that to consolidate that learning. So we follow up, really, it's one-to-one discussion, ongoing meetings. Initially it was just, one-to-one with them. Now as a few members have been through, we've got a therapy team meeting that we can hold, and just the general team meetings where this is now getting integrated within the hospice and can come up with all our colleagues. So the responsibility and accountability. So we use EMIS at our hospice, electronic records. So the HCAs document onto that the work that they've done. So while they're on the programme, they would input there as a trainee therapy assistant, and then once they've finished, then it goes as therapy assistant, so that we can see and we can audit those inputs, and we can see just those on our reports. So there, we give them responsibility over their practice, the same as we would in their HCA roles. That we expect them to just work within their competency, within their confidence. We make sure that they always know they can come back to us for support and not to do anything they're not happy with. But then ultimately the responsibility lies with me as delegating that task and having signed them off as competent.
And in addition to that, on our off duty, we do allocate them time, the ones that have gone through the RITS programme, we do allocate them time off the unit to go and do physiotherapy in the afternoon where staffing permits, shall we say. So they can go and do a physiotherapy role from 1 till 4 in the afternoon with our patients on the inpatient unit. So we've looked at staff feedback and patient feedback, and I won't read them out, it just speaks for itself, but the feedback from staff has been really good. They were very reluctant at first, or some members of our team were very reluctant to go through the programme at first, but they really embraced it and they've got on with it really, and patients don't know any different. So they may need catheterisation. We've got a bladder scanner, they can use the bladder scanner, they can catheterise at the same, they can go and tell the staff nurse what the bladder scanner result says, and then they can go and catheterise. They can do simple dressings, they can do the injections, and they can do the blood pressures. So it has made a huge difference to our team.
I think it's been funny as well, because I think some of the ones that we thought might have been the most resistant at first are actually the ones that are carrying it forward, and it's at the forefront of their minds.
And they want to go further now, don't they?
It's almost like the work that it took to win them round has kept going, and is keeping them moving, so that's been really nice. And then we also presented this as a poster at Hospice UK in the November just gone, so it was really well accepted there. So hopefully it can roll out a bit wider. So what are our future plans? We'll continue to develop our all new staff. We have had 3 new HCA level 3 start due to retirement of other staff members and moving on to other services. So we've had 3 start. We decided to run it with ourselves as trainers instead of paying M&K to come in and do another session. So we have developed that ourselves, and we go through the catheterisation, and we've done all the theory behind it. We've also produced a workbook to go alongside that, so they've got the theory knowledge in the workbook, and then they go through the competencies, and they have developed since with that. We've also since then taken on a clinical educator role as well as my role, and our lymphedema team, one of our members has just retired and come back to work, and she's doing education in the lymphedema service. So we've increased our education base as well since doing all these as well, so that other members of the team can facilitate as well. We're continuing to develop the other teams in the hospice as well. Our community team, we have a hospice at home team which is linked to our hospice that's been going for nearly 4 years now. That was a night service initially, and they're just moving to 24 hours from our hospice. So when they get the new staff, because that's happening in June, when they get the new staff, they will also, the MVQ level 3s, of which I think there'll be 2, will come onto our programme, and they will get the same training. So when they're out in the community, they'll be able to do catheterisations and all the other things that the others can do. We're not trying to take anybody else's roles off them. We're trying to expand it and trying to integrate it into a bigger team. So we're alongside the district nurses who work in our areas. They do some fantastic palliative care work out there as well as us. We're not totally the experts, but it's expanding that. The service will go to 24 hours. We'll also put a service in there where they can go in for 72 hours when they come out of hospital, or if they want to go home to die
until the carers get in, and hopefully that will expand that service as well, hopefully in the future. We've also developed a skills lab on site since doing all this. So we were planning to do a skills lab. We had a mannequin in place, so Susie Simon, you can either be a man or a woman, depending what you're training for on the day. We've got a dedicated skills lab. We had her for 18 months and didn't have a room to put her in. So she sat upstairs in one of our Eve's rooms, wasn't it? So it was like an office, and you'd find her in different positions, sat on a chair, lying on a table. It was, she was a bit off-putting, so she'll just look better lying in a bed now. So we've moved offices around in our learning and research department and generated a skills lab. So we are able to provide the training on site and for others to use the training room as well. So we've had carers groups come in and do, because we've got a 6 steps trainer, that 6 steps trainer's offered services out to care homes and the community. And they've come in and done basic care and things with our skills lab as well. So it's an expanding service all the time. It hasn't stood still since then. And our MVQ level 3s now want to go on and do other things. So we're now looking, we're doing mouth care since we had a big outcry about the mouth swabs and everything else. So we've got a company coming in that's come in and done mouth care training with them. And then they want to do tracheostomy care and gastrostomies. So changing the balloons and things like that as well. So it is an ongoing process, and they're quite looking forward to that as well. So we are quite proactive, but we're quite level-headed as well, because we do understand that in the future we will have to look at roles again, because it's a never-ending circle. We're aware of the changing roles in the nursing education. And you've got TAPs and TNAs these days, training nursing associates. And yes, it is the equivalent. And our healthcare assistants are probably doing the same as what some of those roles are, but they're also getting paid at the same role as what they are, which is why we started off the ball rolling. So although they don't want to go and do their nurse training, because a lot of our staff don't want to go and do the nurse training, but it has given them another string to the bow. And they're quite happy doing it. They've not objected at all. And hopefully in the future that will continue, whether I'm there or not.
Just adding on to what Yola said about the continuing to develop the HCA3s that we've currently got. So we've got the night staff team still to meet with. Hospice at home as they develop, and also the community team as that expands. The hope from my point of view is that we can provide some input that might prevent the need for admission to the hospice or the hospital, but also somewhere that I find a real void in our local area is ongoing care. So we do have people who discharge home where their only remaining needs of the hospice are to do with rehabilitation, and unfortunately we can't keep them there for that. You know, the pain controls being well managed, and everything else is in place for them. So we do unfortunately have to discharge them at that point, and that can lead to a bit of a wait for community teams to come in, sometimes too long. So if we can have people that are hospice minded and available to go in, that I can refer into that service, and we can see those patients more rapidly, then that'll be a real benefit of this service. There's a little bit about my personal development within this service. I'm training currently to be an advanced clinical practitioner. So the idea within our hospice is that we're going to have 2 nurses, one very community experienced, one very hospice and hospital experienced, and then myself bringing the rehabilitation element, that we're trying to put the rehabilitation and that thought of patient care at the centre of all the discussions that we're having about them. So thanks to all the success and the move working into that, we've actually, since we initially started all this programme, we've been able to create a 2-year full-time post for a physiotherapy assistant who started a couple of months ago. So that's giving cover at the moment for my study and clinical leave. And that it was actually recruited from one of the previous trainees who'd been through the programme. So it was really nice to see actually that a number of them applied for the post, and there were also some applications from staff who hadn't yet been through it. So it's creating a bit of a buzz around development of staff and opportunity, and getting a bit of a taster for other things around the organisation. Sometimes, you know, a rest is as good as a change kind of thing. They can come to me for 3 months and then they're back on they've had a bit of a breath of fresh air, a different outlook, and then you know, you've got that ally on the inpatient unit and in day therapy as well. So we just need to think about our ongoing evaluation, making sure things stay up to date. We're going to try and introduce some KPIs around the service so that we can actually show the benefit and show what we're doing, obviously audit that. Updating the portfolio to reflect any changes that there might be through the service, and then as we mentioned earlier, to develop the formal OSCE format so we can actually give them some real documented outcomes of what they've been through. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening.